and thanks for joining us tonight. We've got a great guest for you tonight. We have Joel Metzger, and you may have seen him years past, all on this side of the camera and this side of the table. But for the last year, you've been head of the Utica Water and Power, right?
That's right.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and from talking before we started rolling, you guys have had a great year. I mean, you've had a busy year, a good year. And for those of you who don't know, tell us a little about Utica.
Yeah, so Utica Water and Power Authority is a joint powers authority, a JPA, and we were formed in the mid-90s. And the purpose of Utica is to bring water from the North Fork Stanislaus River from an area called McKay's Reservoirs, where the water comes off the Stanislaus. And then we pick it up in Avery. We actually divert it out of an 18-foot diameter tunnel that's drilled through the rock and is 9 miles long that very few people know is even in the county.
Yeah.
And that's owned by another agency and managed by other folks. But we tap that, and using gravity, the water comes to the surface, and we put it in a gold rush era dirt and concrete canal.
Right.
And from Avery on Hunter Dam Road there, it runs into a reservoir and then heads into a flume and ditch system that goes 27 miles along the rim of the Stanislaus River Canyon and eventually ends up down in Murphy's. And we run it through a hydropower plant right on the grade road leaving Murphy's, heading up the hill. You see a little pond.
So most people have seen it but may not realize what they're looking at, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So just when you're leaving Murphy's going up the hill, you'll see a pond. And at the very top end of that, there's a concrete structure and some electrical looking things, which is our switch yard. And so that's our big power plant, our 3.6 megawatt power plant. And then from there, after we spin that Pelton wheel, which we can talk more about, that's a cool looking thing too, it runs down through downtown Murphy's, the water. And here's another thing people don't know. If we didn't have that diversion in this 27-mile long system, Murphy's Creek or Angels Creek, depending on what you want to call it, would be dry right now, especially in a drought year.
Yeah.
That is not a year-round watershed. It's
and you maintain the level, huh?
We can turn it on and off.
Now, there's been rumors that every once in a while the water turns green right around Irish Day. Was that a sanctioned event, or is that something that was an unsanctioned?
Definitely unsanctioned.
Okay. All right.
I did eventually track down that there was a individual responsible for that. And it was very festive. I know many people enjoyed seeing the green water, but it turned out that the State Water Board was not a big fan.
Yeah, it's not. That's not I can see they're not a big fan. Yes.
So that stopped quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
But so anyway, it's really cool that, a system that provides the town of Murphy's with drinking water, because from our system they actually treat the water and provide it to their customers, both ag and residential. And then also it's recreational, because on its way down the hill to Angels Camp, which is our other partner, and we provide them with drinking water, it's this recreational Murphy's Park vibe that so many people locally love, but also it's a tourism draw from all over the state and beyond to go and set up by that creek on a hot summer day. It's just amazing.
So the people need to thank you for making that consistent water level there to keep it.
Well, so I'll share a secret with you. There is actually some requirements federally for recreational flow, so it's not all altruistic on our part. But yeah,
you're contractually obliged.
That's right.
Yes.
But we're also happy to do it because it is a real boon to the community.
Yeah.
So after it goes through the park, it goes down along the creek by the grade road heading toward Angels Camp, and we actually then have a dam down there, and we divert it into the lower Angels Canal. And it goes into Ross Reservoir off of French Gulch Road, which you might see from driving by there.
Right.
And eventually goes down kind of by the Rolleri property, by the rock yard there.
So the pipe that you see going across that field, is that one of yours?
That's one of ours.
That's one of yours.
The big gray pipe that's actually 3 feet in diameter. Kind of don't realize how big that is when you're driving by at 55. But that is called a penstock. And a penstock is a pipe that leads from what's called a forebay, which is a small reservoir or big reservoir, and then it terminates at a power plant and uses that head pressure in the pipe to spin the turbine and make power.
So you still have another power facility down there in Angels Camp?
We do. Our second one, 1.4 megawatt, and it's off a Booster Way, and it's right on the creek across from Tryon Park there.
Yeah.
So up at the forebay, before that penstock goes off, City of Angels treatment plant is provided with water. And so they treat it, and then they provide it to all their residential and commercial customers. And the Dogtown Ditch Users Association, which is a big group of irrigators along Dogtown Road, they get water as well. And so that greens up that whole corridor as well.
Very cool. Now, I mean, it's funny, there's a lot of these small community infrastructure things, all those scattered all over the states and stuff. Could your system, could it be built today? I mean, is it one of those things to where is it, I mean, this is infrastructure, but, well, I know we're going way off topic, but it's a, you know, the value of the fact that it exists now. I mean, it's like, we were talking about before, is like, look, I think all of us want to be, like you guys do green power. You're green.
We're green.
You're green. But it's this disconnect I think sometimes we have from the fact that when you turn a faucet on, or if you flip on a light switch, that still has to physically come from somewhere.
Right.
I mean, and that's, I think, is, you know.
Every time you turn your air conditioner on, it needs more from the grid. And a power plant somewhere has to ramp just a little bit to accommodate that, because power is just about instant. And so there is a constant up and down, and that's managed at the state level, and we're one piece of that. We push power onto the grid locally, and we sell that power. But there is so much infrastructure that's running in the background that people do not realize. And in our case, it's a 27-mile long system that could probably not be built today, to be honest with you, John.
Right.
Because
like with the tunnel,
I mean, think about the environmental consequences and the permitting you would need to dig a trench for 27 miles along a steep canyon wall. You know, it's just not something that you could really get through. And all the reservoirs, it's very hard to build a reservoir in California because of the environmental regulations. Yeah. But what's cool is, you know who built this? It's gold miners. Yeah. They needed this water to run their hydraulic mining operations. Yeah. And, you know, they started on Angels Creek, and that wasn't enough because it's a seasonal watershed. And then they headed up the hill and got Stanislaus and a couple different competing companies. This is like in 1852. Mm-hmm. They each built their own canal. Can you imagine, you know, all the work that went into that? Hand dug, you know, using donkeys and oxen. Mm-hmm. And then eventually they consolidated. Still wasn't enough water, so they went up higher in the mountain, built Union Reservoir, Utica came, Reservoir, Alpine was built. Right. Eventually Old Spicer, which is just a tiny reservoir, like 4,000 acre feet back in the day. And then later on, New Spicer was built like in the late 80s. Yeah. And now it's 189,000 acre feet. So a huge reservoir compared to what that old one was. So all that gold mining infrastructure was why we have the system we have today. And we're so fortunate, but it does come with its drawbacks. And it's old. Right. It is old. It is failing in many cases. It's expensive to repair. If someone were to build that system today, it would be a pipe, not a ditch. Right. And so there are a lot of nuances. Is that part of the? I know one of the things as far as your infrastructure replacement costs and updating. I mean, that's a huge portion of your budget, right? Just to keeping the beast alive. It is, yeah. So we have a capital improvement program, and you know there are tens of millions, hundreds of millions of projects that we'd like to do. Yeah. And so all we can do is prioritize the top ones, and usually it's just a piece of those projects. Mm-hmm. So our longest flume, and a flume is a section of canal that's built out of wood. Right. So it's like crossing a drainage or a super rocky area, and it's kind of the most iconic thing on the system is the wooden structure and the metal line, and it's a beautiful thing to look at on the side of a hillside.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
So we have one called 3/4 mile flume, and it's almost 3/4 miles long, and it's right on the face of the Stanislaus River Canyon. I mean, we're talking cliffs, hundreds of feet drop off if you fell off the far side. And so, replacing that with something that wasn't wood, like a pipeline or concrete or anything, other than what's there, we're talking millions upon millions of dollars. And so we don't have that kind of money. Our revenue generally comes from hydropower sales. $900,000 to $1.2 million a year of the $3 million budget is from there. And so if we, if we can't afford it, we're not going to do it. So what we can do is we can take a piece of that flume that's maybe about to fall off the mountain, and go in there and rip it out and put new wood in there and new everything and make sure that it's not going to fail. Because any one section of that 27 miles fails, the downstream users are totally cut off from water. And it's the only water supply that Murphy's, Vallecito, Douglas Flat, Red Hill, Angels Camp, and all the ag in that area, that's their supply. That's
now, what was the fire? Wasn't there a fire?
Derby fire.
The Derby fire. That impacted it, right?
2001, it burned 7 of the wooden flumes. And 3/4 mile was totally burned to the ground. So our biggest flume was gone. And so what they did is they had to put temporary pumps in at the canal section that was still there, go up over the hill and come down to an area
to tie it into the system.
It was like just a trickle compared to the normal flow, and it got people by. But that's what makes me as a general manager lose sleep at night. As we see the drought, everything's tinder dry, the wildfires are burning like crazy. All it takes is, one spark down in Camp 9 area, it'll run right up that hill and we'll be right there again. So we're not just complacent about this. I have applied for grant funding in my first year to assess how we can replace the wood with something that won't burn. And so if we get this grant from Cal OES and FEMA.
And there's pools of funds to go after for you guys, right?
100%.
Okay.
Yep, 100%. And so we did have to get a hazard mitigation plan passed for the first time to qualify. We got that passed, so I'm real proud of that in the first year. And then I put in about a $500,000 grant to get that study done. So if we get that, then we'll know what we need to do, what are the most vulnerable flumes, and hopefully move forward with replacing them.
A little thing I wanted to bring up is that this is not, we talked about this a little earlier, is that your background. And I thought it's kind of a neat story is the fact that, lots of times kids that grow up here, lots of times they feel like they have to leave. They have to leave, there's no path for them. And I was saying, I think you're actually one of the, a success story on the fact that, local product, and you've been able to, you found your niche. You found your niche here. And what would you say to other kids, coming up? I mean, I think that's, and it's not, but I just think sometimes that story needs to be told. I think because your career path to where, it probably wasn't even an obvious one to you 15 years ago.
No, not at all. I didn't want to be here. Let's just be honest. I was ready to get out of Calaveras County, and so when I had the opportunity to go to college, I took that and I got out of here. And I didn't plan on coming back. And so
you didn't plan on coming back?
I did not plan on coming back, and I think that's common. I don't think I realized what an amazing place this is to live. But when I did come back after college at Sonoma State, I took a summer job at the Calaveras Enterprise newspaper, and I wasn't even interested in journalism. It was just kind of a thing that I thought might be helpful to me. And they sent me all over Calaveras County on assignments, and I fell in love with the county doing that. So it was kind of a reintroduction at a different stage in life. And then I realized I do want to be here. I want to stay here. And so after 6 years at the newspaper, working my way up to editor, I went over to Calaveras County Water District and worked for them and on their management team for another 6 years. I guess I work in 6-year increments.
That's how it works. Okay.
And totally learned a brand new industry, water, which I have always been fascinated by, but I really fell in love with public service and providing water to the community.
One of the reasons I wanted to bring it up was the fact that lots of times kids think that there's an obvious career path, but I think sometimes you think that with a lot of your public infrastructure stuff, it's not in the trades, but it's kind of auxiliary too. There's a lot of little niches to where people can have good careers that they may not think about. Is that correct?
I think you're absolutely right. So utilities in general are overlooked by most people, and you don't realize I would be in the field digging ditches. No. You have human resources jobs, you have engineering jobs, you have financial and accounting jobs, you have public relations jobs, you have customer service jobs. You have all kinds of different things that these agencies need, and they generally pay very well on good benefits, good salary, and very stable jobs. And so I was extremely fortunate to find my way into a public agency, and I really encourage anybody who is thinking, there's no way I could ever get a job in the foothills, to look there and realize the barrier to entry is actually low in many cases, because a lot of those jobs you might not actually need a college degree. You might just need a certification to be a distribution worker or a treatment operator, and you can even go in and have the agency pay for your school.
Right.
So
Right.
it's really cool working for a public agency, and I love it because it's rewarding.
Yeah.
Because you're providing what the most valuable thing that
Water
we all
and
need,
power.
water.
Yeah.
I mean, that's critical.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted. A little bit of an aside is I know because you were talking, you've had a good first year, right?
Yeah.
And segue into back to back to Utica on the year. Now, what have you what are some of the notable things you wanted for Utica?
So I mean, first year as a general manager, so that's kind of a new thing for me.
Oh boy.
I've always been below the GM, so responsibility, some extra stress, but also the opportunity to really kind of take the lead and shape the future.
Yeah.
And so I definitely took on a lot this last year, and I went hard, and we got a lot done, and maybe I won't go quite so hard next year, because I think sometimes you push too hard. But some of the things I'm really proud of. My team got a new power contract that is approved by PG&E, and we're just waiting to finish the contract. And that's going to take our power revenues for our large Murphy's powerhouse from like the mid 20s per megawatt hour to the low 70s per megawatt hour. So we're massive increase in revenue, and that's our only way to increase revenue is to get more for our power.
The smaller power generators now, I mean, do you have more leverage than you've had in the past or less? I mean, with usage going up and demand, does it help you guys a little bit?
There are some market things we can take advantage of, but this is a program called REMAT, and it is specifically targeted to encourage small green energy projects, both new and existing. And so we had some challenges to meet the program requirements, and we actually had to try 4 or 5 times before we got it approved, but we were persistent and we got it in there. So as long as everything goes well over the next couple months, we're going to enter a 20-year contract at that higher price.
Congrats.
So that's
cool.
something that the team is very proud of.
Oh, that is neat.
We also got CalPERS pension for our folks, which they've never had. And so that's something that we had never qualified for, and we were able to get over those humps. And so that's a huge thing, because it's good to have people
recruitment and
retention. If you don't have competitive as a public agency, you're going to lose people.
Now, does that mean, let's say somebody that's working for Calaveras County, for as an example, would their retirement, was it make it portable? They could move.
Yeah, anybody coming from a CalPERS agency coming over here, it just continues. So that's a huge benefit for us to keep good people. And then also, we totally rebranded Utica. You'll see a new logo.
You have merch now, right? You got merch.
We have merchandise right here. And we have a new website. We have social media, Instagram, Facebook. We're doing a lot more outward-facing education. And so people don't just see this gold rush era flume and go, wow, what the heck is that? I have no idea. Now I'm hoping people know a little bit more, because they're seeing it on Facebook, on their news feeds, they're seeing the website. I'm out and about talking to groups and giving presentations.
And a little bit of an interesting thing is I noticed with my sons, some of the younger generations, don't you think there's a little bit of nostalgia for them? For kind of the analog world, they grew up as digital natives, but I still think I see it in my sons in the fact that like one of my oldest is buying used watches, analog off of eBay and rebuilding them. Just the fact that, your whole system is like a giant Swiss watch. I mean, it has all these little pieces and stuff, and I just think it's, and maybe not, but I think in some ways as we go more and more digital, some things that are like big, bulky, and analog almost have a different allure to them.
Totally. It is the coolest system. I mean, these powerhouses are like 1940s technology.
Right.
You can't find parts. You have to hand fabricate everything. I mean, the fact that my team has the skills to keep them running blows my mind. I couldn't do it. And so, I mean, hats off to them for keeping that going, keeping that power and revenue source going.
So like turbines and impeller, I mean, a lot of stuff, do you guys just have to build it in-house, or is there places that,
So luckily, like the Pelton wheel itself, they have a long lifespan. I mean, they are a hunk of metal. So, but you can see the ones that did get taken out of service, like at the Angels Museum. There's one in concrete out there, painted black. So you can see what it looks like, the Pelton wheels. And then just all the components. I mean, you can upgrade some things, but certain things, you just have to remake it or just just make it work and just keep it going, baby. And so it is neat, I think, to blend modern technology with gold rush era technology.
Right.
And so this is the cool thing. We have 1852 tech that we're controlling with a smartphone. And so we have advanced with a SCADA system, which is basically a way to remotely monitor your system and control it.
Right.
Where on your
all
iPhone,
your switches and all the rest of that
you can
stuff. Yeah.
you could turn the whole system off. You can turn it on. You can turn plants off, turn them on. You can make adjustments. You have alarms if there's any kind of a problem. And so one of my team members can run the entire 27-mile system in both plants, whereas PG&E, when they were running it, they had like 20 guys on this thing who actually lived on the system. They were like ditch tender houses. And back in the gold rush days, I mean, they were walking this thing constantly because as soon as you get a tree fall and it blocks the water and it starts overflowing, the banker roads, you're washed out.
Yeah.
Your water source is done until you can get that thing turned off, rebuild it.
Right.
So it's a really cool blend, like you said, totally nostalgic, totally old school. And yet we're running it with a smartphone.
Right.
And we're super efficient in that way.
Now, did that help you get some of your, like for the contract, your new contracts, like with the PG&E?
The remap program.
Is that part of the stuff where you have to be able to?
We do have to meet a lot of requirements to be connected to the PG&E grid, and we've had to make massive upgrades to do that. Some things are grandfathered in, thankfully. We don't have to be completely modern with that. So remap's kind of a mix of those things, but right now we're positioned to where we have everything we need to go ahead and start that contract. And so that's our biggest hope, because we're always short on revenue at Utica. Our budget is $3 million if we're doing everything we want to do with reserves and CIP and our fixed costs.
Yeah.
But our revenues are, $1.2 million, maybe a little bit more with some irrigation sales. So the only way we make it is to have our JPA members, City of Angels and Union Public Utility, contribute, because they get water from the system.
Right.
And they're part owners of the system. We manage it for them.
Now, the painful part of our discussion a little bit is on the drought stuff. Now, what is, we're in another drought year. We don't know what next year is going to look like. What's it doing? Not only to you guys, revenue-wise, but what some of the stuff you had talked about that's coming down the pipe. Yeah. What's the situation on that now?
So big thing happened yesterday, and whenever people watch this, August 3rd is when the meeting was. The State Water Resources Control Board unanimously, 5-0, voted to approve an emergency regulation. And that is basically assuming the power to curtail, which means cut back, water, not only for junior water right holders, which is 1914 to today, but also senior water right holders, which is pre-1914. And the senior rights used to be untouchable.
Right.
No one could curtail those. If you had those, they were gold. And that's what Utica has. And so we always thought, well, these are good as gold. This is what everyone wants to have and doesn't have. Like Tuolumne has no water rights, and we have a pretty good amount of them here in Calaveras. And so this is unprecedented. So they approved it on August 3rd. It's under review by the state's legal department, Office of Administrative Law. Yeah. So that needs to go through before it will be enacted. But if it does go through, we as a state, all around the Central Valley, because this affects the Sacramento watershed and the San Joaquin and all its tributaries, we're going to see folks not be able to divert water for things like agriculture anymore. It's only going to be able to go to consumptive use, which is things like residential and commercial. And even then, they want to limit it to indoor use only, and that's 55 gallons per person per day. So we're going to see, water agencies have to make those calculations of how much water do we actually get to take out of the river, and it doesn't include outdoor use. And so I fear this is going to be one of the most painful summers if this does get approved, for folks who don't have access to stored water. Because, that's kind of one of the only exceptions is if you have access to previously stored water, if you're downstream of a reservoir and you can use that.
Like you had surface water that was stored or whatever.
Yep, you do have the right to use that. But if you're diverting from the natural flow of a stream, it's only for basic health and human safety needs. And so, we're going to see ag land fallowed in the Central Valley in a big way. Cities and special districts are going to have to cut back what they take out. It's going to be painful.
I know this is beyond the scope of this, but I know you guys have to think about this stuff. Do we need to really rethink the whole, a lot of the municipal water use? it's because, some of the things, I mean, how we're treating, the wastewater usage. I mean, are we going to be forced into really doing a rethink of how we're doing stuff?
We are, and here's why. Whether you think that climate change is happening naturally or because of some other reason, let's just put that aside.
Right.
We know that it's getting warmer and that conditions are changing. And so here's what's happened. The biggest reservoir in the state was always the Sierra snowpack. And it was tens of millions of acre feet, bigger than any one reservoir in the state. And it would, totally stock up in the winter, and then it would slowly melt, in some cases all the way through the entire summer, or at least into July and August. And so we didn't need that many reservoirs because the big reservoir was the snowpack, and it would just continue refilling, and it was the most beautiful system ever. That's why the California Central Valley is the most productive ag land anywhere in the world. And so we're losing snowpack, not every year, but more and more. It's falling more as rain and less as snow. And so instead of having that biggest reservoir that we all relied on.
And that also ties into stuff that people may think is unrelated, but if you have forests that have 400 trees an acre instead of 100 trees an acre, a lot of that rainfall never even gets to the ground. So there's this whole thing is so...
Yeah, it's interconnected. So basically, we built a system relying on this snowpack, and it's no longer reliable. And so we now basically have too much demand and not enough supply. And so, there are many different ways. One is, we have to reduce the demand, which means taking ag out of production and not growing as much in our communities, or we need to increase supply. And really, the only way to do that is to put more in the ground, in the aquifers, which is a great idea. I think everyone agrees that, or build more surface water storage. And that's been very difficult to do in this state unless it's an off-stream reservoir, and even then it's been tough.
So you think there's going to be more stuff on, for groundwater recharge stuff, a lot more projects for that type of stuff?
It's already in full swing. Anytime we can put it down underground, it's the best place to keep water. So I think we're going to see a lot more projects to try to sink more water underground and store it for times like right now.
Yeah. We got 2 minutes left. And so the synopsis, congrats on a good first year. And also, I think congrats on your personal story. As a local person that's found, I think it's a story that needs to be at least highlighted a little bit. So, yeah.
So, I think my takeaway on the first year is this is an amazing community to be a part of. I'm so fortunate to be where I am, and I'm so fortunate to have a team at Utica. We're only 10 people, and we're running this huge system, and they're awesome. And, they work so hard every day behind the scenes, and 10,000 plus people who rely on that for their water don't realize what's going on. And they have to get up in the middle of the night and be out for 24 hours at a time during storms to keep that canal cleared. And so I really recognize how amazing the team is over at Utica. And then, just for me, personal growth, trying to find out my mistakes and their good things and grow as a manager and try to, be the best manager that I can, because if I can be successful, our community can be successful. And we're making progress. There's a lot more good news to come that I can't wait to share with you in future years. And it's been a great ride so far. I hope that we can continue along this same trajectory.
Thanks for joining us, Joel.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.